The morning sun had barely risen over the fields when the first call came in. To the 911 dispatcher, it sounded routine at first. Another suburban voice on the line, a woman speaking quickly, her tone laced with indignation rather than fear. "There's a suspicious man out here," the caller hissed. "He's moving equipment around like he owns the place. And there are vehicles on the property. I know he doesn't belong here. This is farm land, not some, whatever he's doing." The dispatcher asked the obvious question. Did she know who the man was? Karen's answer was immediate. "No, but he doesn't belong here. This is our HOA community. He looks like he's setting up some kind of illegal business. You need to send someone now before he brings more of them here." What Karen left out, what she always left out, was that the property she was looking at didn't belong to her, or to the HOA. It belonged to one man, a quiet, reserved landowner named Marcus King. His family had worked this stretch of farmland for generations, long before the HOA existed, long before the subdivision had been cut into neat little plots that now ringed the edge of his land. Karen didn't care about history. All she saw was a black man running tractors, trailers, and tools on her neighborhood's edge, and to her mind, that made him a problem. When the sheriff's deputy rolled up the dirt road, lights flashing, Marcus looked up from where he was hitching a trailer to his truck. He'd been through this dance before. Karen and her allies had called the cops on him 3 times this year alone, each time with some flimsy complaint about zoning or noise or suspicious activity. Each time, the deputies left shaking their heads, embarrassed that their time had been wasted. But today was different. Today, Marcus wasn't just a farmer. Today, he wasn't just a landowner defending his family's property. Today, when the deputy stepped out of the cruiser and asked for ID, Marcus gave him a steady look and slowly reached into his jacket. Karen, standing off to the side with her arms crossed and her phone still clutched in her hand, leaned forward eagerly. She was waiting for the gotcha moment, the point when the officer would haul him off for daring to stand his ground. Instead, Marcus flipped open a leather wallet. The gold shield caught the light, unmistakable. "Special Agent Marcus King," he said calmly. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." The deputy blinked, taken aback. Karen froze, her jaw slackening in disbelief. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Ma'am, you've trespassed on my land multiple times. You've filed false police reports against me. And you've interfered with my work here, which, just so you're aware, is connected to a federal investigation. I've let it slide before, but this crosses the line." Karen stammered, suddenly less sure of herself. Wait. I didn't know, I thought." "You thought wrong," Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp now. "And you've been told before this is private land. My land. Long before your HOA showed up with its fences and rules. You don't own this farm. You don't control what happens here. And next time you call 911 on me for doing my job, you're going to be answering to more than just the county sheriff." The deputy gave a low whistle and turned to Karen. "Ma'am, you'd better leave now. And I'd think real hard before making another call like this." For once, Karen had no comeback. She turned on her heel, red-faced, retreating toward her spotless SUV. Marcus watched her go, then looked back at the deputy, who gave him a nod of respect. The farm fell quiet again, except for the steady hum of cicadas and the soft rustle of the fields. Marcus knew this wasn't the last time Karen or the HOA would try to push him off his own land, but now, they knew something they hadn't before. He wasn't just a farmer. He was the law, and he was done playing nice. The sun rose slow and golden across the wide stretch of farmland, painting long shadows across fields that had been tilled and tended for nearly a century. Birds chattered along the fence posts, and the steady hum of a tractor rumbled through the early morning air. To Marcus King, it was just another day of honest work. To Karen Miller, self-appointed watchwoman of the HOA, it was an outrage waiting to be reported. Karen had lived in the subdivision for less than 5 years, but in her mind, that was more than enough time to establish herself as an authority. She walked her dog along the edge of the community every morning, scanning for anything that seemed out of place. The neighbors joked about her nosiness, but Karen wore the label proudly. She believed she was the last line of defense between their pristine cul-de-sac and the chaos of the world outside. That morning, she saw Marcus in the distance, standing tall beside his truck, hitching a trailer with practiced ease. He was dressed in a work shirt and jeans, his movements steady and sure. The tractor parked nearby, the tools stacked neatly on the edge of his barn, and the quiet efficiency of his work should have reassured anyone watching. But Karen didn't see order. She saw threat. "He doesn't belong here," she muttered under her breath, tugging her little terrier along the sidewalk. "This isn't his kind of neighborhood. Not with all this equipment. Not with those trucks." Her thoughts spiraled. In her mind, Marcus wasn't just a farmer. He was someone scheming, setting up an operation of some kind, a place that would drag down the value of their homes. She didn't care that his family had owned this land long before the HOA's manicured lawns ever existed. She didn't care that he paid taxes and maintained his property better than half the subdivision. To her, the sight of him working that morning meant only one thing: a disturbance to be stamped out. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. Her voice came sharp, clipped, full of righteous indignation. "Yes, I'd like to report suspicious activity," she began. "There's a man out here moving equipment on land near our subdivision. I don't think he lives here. He's bringing vehicles in and out, and it looks like some kind of illegal setup. You need to send someone immediately." The dispatcher, used to her calls, because Karen had dialed more than once this year, asked calmly, "Ma'am, do you know who this man is? Is he threatening anyone?" Karen bristled. "I don't know who he is, but he doesn't belong here. And no, he hasn't threatened anyone, yet. But he's making everyone uncomfortable. Isn't that enough?" The dispatcher gave the usual assurances, said an officer would be sent, and hung up. Karen smiled in satisfaction. To her, she had once again done her civic duty. Meanwhile, Marcus kept working, completely unaware that trouble was brewing, though, in truth, he had a feeling. He knew the routine by now. 3 times this year alone, Karen had summoned the sheriff's department to his farm. The complaints varied: noise, suspicious vehicles, possible drug activity. Each time, the deputies arrived, found nothing wrong, and left shaking their heads. Marcus never made a fuss about it. He kept his voice calm, his tone polite, even when the accusations stung. But each time, a part of him tightened. It wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a message. No matter how much he proved himself, no matter how much land his family had held, people like Karen still saw him as an intruder. By the time the county sheriff's cruiser rolled up the dirt road, Marcus already knew why it was there. He leaned against his truck, wiping his hands on a rag, and waited. The deputy, a young man with weary eyes, stepped out and adjusted his belt. "Morning, sir," the deputy said cautiously. "Got a call about some suspicious activity out here." Marcus gave a small, humorless smile. "Let me guess. Woman in a gray SUV. Walking a yappy little dog." The deputy chuckled despite himself. "Something like that." Behind them, Karen's SUV pulled up to the shoulder. She stepped out with her arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin line of smugness. She was already rehearsing what she'd say, how she had caught the intruder, how she had bravely stood up for the neighborhood. The deputy glanced back at her, then returned his attention to Marcus. "Mind if I see some ID, sir? Just to keep the report clean." Marcus didn't argue. He reached into his jacket slowly, deliberately, so there'd be no room for misunderstanding. He pulled out a leather wallet, flipped it open, and held it out. The badge gleamed in the morning sun. "Special Agent Marcus King," he said evenly. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." The deputy's eyes widened. Karen gasped audibly, her smug expression crumbling into stunned silence. She took a half step back, as though the very sight of the badge had burned her. Marcus let the moment hang there, his gaze shifting from the deputy to Karen. His voice stayed calm, but there was steel underneath it now. "Ma'am, you've called the police on me 3 times this year. Each time, I've been working on my land my family's owned since long before this subdivision existed. Each time, you've wasted law enforcement's time with baseless claims. But today, you've crossed a different line." Karen's face flushed. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. For once, her certainty had deserted her. Marcus snapped the badge shut and slid it back into his jacket. "I've let it go before, because I figured maybe you'd learn. But you didn't. And if you keep this up, If you call 911 on me one more time, you won't just be talking to the sheriff's department. You'll be talking to federal authorities about false reports and harassment. Do I make myself clear?" The deputy cleared his throat, trying to keep the peace but clearly impressed. "Ma'am," he said, turning toward Karen, "I strongly suggest you head home. And maybe stop making these calls unless there's a real emergency." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She finally turned on her heel, storming back to her SUV. Her dog yapped at her ankles as she climbed inside, slamming the door. Marcus stood silently, watching her drive off, the dust from her tires rising into the air. The deputy gave him a respectful nod. "Sorry about this, Agent King. We'll make a note of it in the report." "No problem, Deputy," Marcus replied. His voice softened again, but his eyes stayed hard. "Just doing my job." Both of them. As the cruiser pulled away, Marcus looked back at his land, the fields stretching wide, the barn standing proud, the tractor waiting for him to finish the day's work. He knew Karen wouldn't stop. People like her rarely did. But now, she knew the truth. He wasn't just a farmer. He wasn't just a neighbor. He was someone with the power to push back. And the next time she tried to come for him, she'd learn just how much weight that badge carried.